Welcome to a special edition of Hard Talk on the Road from Colombia, a country which has lived through 50 years of war and is desperately looking for a path to a lasting peace. Now, the struggle for Colombia's future won't be settled in the capital, Bogota, but in the rural areas and the villages, traditionally the stronghold of the armed revolutionary movement, the FARC. The president here believes the FARC has been tamed, but many Colombians wonder, what if he's wrong? From the Caribbean coast to the Amazon basin by way of the Andes Mountains, much of Colombia is hard to reach by road. But 5 decades of guerrilla war have spread suffering right across this land. At the height of their powers, the FARC made driving on Colombia's roads outside of Bogota a nightmare. Guerrilla roadblocks and hostage-taking were grim facts of life here. But in recent years, the FARC have been pushed right back deep into the jungle. And on this road today, well, the only roadblocks are run by the Colombian army. Nazareth is a village of peasant farmers about a 4-hour drive from Bogota. The Rubiano family is celebrating the confirmation of 11-year-old Andrea. Spirits are high. There's hope that Nazareth's children won't have to live with the fear, suspicion and violence experienced by previous generations. The sympathy of the people. Don Alvaro is the patriarch of the Rubiano family.
Así es, esto ha sido zona de conflicto toda la vida. La guerrilla, por ejemplo, viene a que le hagan un favor, que le sirvan, y si no les colabora, baila. Y el ejército también la misma cosa, tiene que colaborar. Entonces aquí viene a dos juegos, aquí el campesino, el trabajador.
What do you feel about the peace deal between the government and the FARC? Do you think it is a good thing, or does it make you nervous?
Pues que hubiera el proceso de paz sería una cosa buena. Pero toca esperar, si se hace o no se hace. Porque hay mucha gente que no cree en el proceso de paz. Porque le voy a decir una cosa, la gran oligarquía colombiana no acepta lo que la guerrilla les dice. Ni la guerrilla les acepta a los oligarcas colombianos, a ningún capitalista. Entonces ahí está el detalle. ¿Qué paz puede haber ahí?
Our presence in Nazareth prompted a visit from soldiers based nearby. These days, the FARC threat is much reduced, but there's still uneasiness around strangers. The most ardent believer in Colombia's peace process is President Juan Manuel Santos. Last September, he flew to Havana. Under the gaze of Raúl Castro, he shook the hand of the leader of the FARC, known as Timoshenko. These images electrified Colombia. It was an extraordinary reaching out to a group who've waged war on the state for 50 years. Colombia's armed revolutionary front was formed in the mid-60s. Marxism and guerrilla warfare came together in a bid to overthrow the country's ruling elite and the almost feudal distribution of land and wealth. The struggle became a dirty war that has claimed more than 200,000 lives. The government used death squads and disappearances. The guerrillas embraced kidnapping, extortion and drug trafficking to fund 20,000 fighters. Now, though, their numbers have been reduced to just 6,000, pushed back deep into the jungle. But their leader, Comandante Timoshenko, is defiant.
Que nos dice que es que llegamos a dialogar porque estamos derrotados. Nada más falso. Para el revolucionario nunca hay derrotas. Por más dura y difícil que sea la situación, para un revolucionario nunca hay derrotas.
The Western Hemisphere's last hot war is simmering, no longer boiling. Last summer, the FARC declared a ceasefire, not their first, but their most credible so far. The Colombian military hasn't yet followed suit. The FARC ceasefire is holding, but it's fragile. The last firefight that these guys had with the guerrillas was just 1 month ago. So, if the president does declare a formal ceasefire, he knows he's taking an enormous gamble. Colombia has a population of 46 million. It has a growing economy and vast untapped potential. But 50 years of war have cast a dark shadow. In the center of Bogotá, there are reminders of people lost in past atrocities. The government classifies 7 million people as victims of the conflict. I spoke to one former captive held in the jungle for years.
The only feeling that I feel is that I lost 6 years of my life. It's a very difficult situation, right?
Were there times when you were in chains?
Yeah, approximately for 1 month when we intend to escape.
Then they chained you?
Yeah, it was a terrible experience because we feel like animals, no?
Did you, at any point in your captivity, think to yourself, I'm not going to get out of this, I may die here?
Yeah, many times, but many times too, I try to be strong, I try, but it's not easy.
The country is at a crucial moment. The president is in the middle of a complicated peace negotiation with the movement, the group, the FARC, who held you for 6 years. What are your feelings about the prospect of the government doing a deal with the people who held you and took 6 years of your life?
Yo lo que creo es que el presidente está haciendo lo que tiene que hacer, ¿no? Que es hacer la paz. Sin consideración ninguna si en algún momento tuvieron mucha o poca gente secuestrada. Y yo creo en el fondo que es lo que tiene que hacer, porque si no, no podría hacer la paz. Hay momentos en que no es fácil para mí digerir ciertas cosas, ¿no? Sobre todo esta última semana que alguna persona propuso que les iban a dar 40 puestos en el Congreso. Y leí, pero qué exageración. Yo creo que hay que darles una participación política, pero no tiene sentido regalarles los escaños en el Congreso que implican una representación. Digamos que estos momentos, cuando surgen este tipo de discusiones, hay momentos en que eso me pega, pero más allá de eso creo que el presidente está haciendo lo que tiene que hacer, ¿no? Por el bien de Colombia.
When it comes to the peace process, Colombians sort of want to have their cake and eat it too, because the newspaper opinion polls show that a clear majority of Colombians support the peace talks. But at the same time, most Colombians say they don't want to see FARC leaders allowed into politics, and they certainly don't want to see former guerrillas move into a house next door to them.
En Colombia, casi la mitad de las personas que han hecho parte de grupos armados al margen de la ley ingresaron cuando eran menores de edad. Muchos han muerto, muchos están en prisión y otros perdieron la posibilidad de desarrollarse como colombianos del común. El país entero se ha visto afectado por estos grupos. Pero hoy, un futuro mejor es posible. Cada vez son
The government already has a rehabilitation and reintegration program for former FARC guerrillas.
Una persona desmovilizada es como un
Thousands of fighters who've deserted or renounced their allegiance after capture go through a 6-year-long program of counseling, re-education and training. The rehab centers don't advertise themselves and have elaborate security. Reintegration remains a sensitive subject. 2 former guerrillas agreed to talk to me.
A ver, sí, yo hice muchas cosas de las que me arrepiento, aunque no participé nunca en secuestros ni en extorsiones, sí participamos en muchos eventos en los que se veía afectada la población civil. A sumarle a eso, a que yo nunca me fui convencido de una ideología política, si bien es cierto que yo sí he estado de acuerdo en algunas cosas del socialismo y de la ideología de la FARC, no totalmente todo, no en todo estaba de acuerdo con ellos. Entonces esas cosas sí me hicieron de que yo me alejara del grupo por esas cosas en las que intervine, que le hacían daño a otras personas que no eran del grupo sino a la población.
Do you believe that the leadership is serious about putting down its weapons?
Creo que hubo asambleas guerrilleras y que se votó y que ganó la votación de la negociación a favor. Y eso no quiere decir que el problema esté resuelto en cuanto que la complejidad del camino andado en 50 años, en los últimos 25 años, muchos tipos de relaciones con muchos tipos de negocios pueden complicar muchísimo esto, porque esos intereses y esas relaciones pueden complicar el proceso adentro.
In Bogotá, many still see the FARC as an enemy to be destroyed, not reintegrated. I was invited to meet the man credited by many Colombians with dealing the FARC a series of stunning military blows. Two-time President Álvaro Uribe. He's become the most savage critic of his successor and would-be peacemaker, President Juan Manuel Santos.
No. He doesn't listen to what we say. He listens only what FARC says.
But I'm going to ask him to directly address what you say to me, because it's very important what you say to me.
No, I understood. This is what I do not want.
Sorry, I don't understand. This is an important interview for BBC where we want you to tell the world what you think about the current situation, particularly the peace talks with the FARC. This is a platform for you to speak to the world, not just to Santos. The relationship between the former and current presidents is toxic. That's the way you feel, but for us...
Usted sabe que donde participe Santos, yo no participo en nada. Esto es muy claro. A Julio Sánchez le he negado esa entrevista por eso.
When I told Mr. Uribe I was also seeing President Santos, he walked out of the interview, saying we should speak to one of his party colleagues instead.
What we feel is that given impunity to terror, given political representation to terrorism, is not a good example for the future of Colombia.
Do you really believe that President Santos, who is a former defense minister, a former leader of the military operations against the FARC, is cozying up to terrorism?
He is, because you cannot say that people who kidnapped 7,000 people in Colombia, people who took our towns and blew them with bombs, who put illegal blocks in the roads and kidnap people, they can just take out the clothes full of blood and just get into office and do not pay jail.
Well, you know, the transitional justice arrangements that appear to be agreed with the FARC involve trials. They involve those who confess to crimes being allowed to have alternatives to prison, maybe 5 years of house arrest or restricted movement, and those who do not confess or do not tell the full truth will go to prison, and those who are convicted of crimes against humanity...
That's impunity. You cannot say that for FARC it's a big deal to confess crimes everybody know they committed and just go free. That's not a good example for the future of Colombia. What is going to happen with all these young people who are in criminal bands, in small drug trafficking? They're going to think you can go into this run of crime business, and at the end you can negotiate with the state and don't have any guilt about anything you did.
Colombia's been through a 50-year war. 220,000 people at least have died.
Yeah,
and now is an opportunity for peace. And you're saying you want permanent war.
I don't want permanent war. I want law. It's about coherence. It's about the future of Colombia. We're not saying that we want a war forever. We just want them to understand that this is not an extortion.
But the bottom line is, you are very worried that you're losing this argument. The opinion polls show that 70% or more of the Colombian public support the negotiation and support Santos' strategy.
But they also show that 80% of the people do not want FARC to have political representation, and 80% want them to go to jail.
This is a presidential palace, and has a name.
Colombia's president is under enormous pressure, but he seems at ease with himself. Now we've set up over here, so he believes he can change the course of his country's history.
It's much easier to make war, much easier to lead in times of war. To make peace, you have to have a different type of leadership. You have to be able to convince people to change their minds, their attitudes, their way of approaching the enemy or the victimizer, and that's much more difficult.
Tell me about that historic handshake with the leader of the FARC, Timochenko, in Havana in September.
It's a matter of timing, and I thought it would be the correct time to start meeting face-to-face with the commander of the FARC, to try to push negotiations at a higher level, which we are doing, and that it was the correct moment to meet him. Of course, he's been our enemy for all my life, and I've been his enemy for all life.
That's right. Most Colombians believe that he has the blood of hundreds of Colombian civilians on his hands. And you shook his hand.
Yes, because you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. And he is the enemy. And if we want to end this war, we have to sit down with our enemies, and if we have an agreement, shake their hands to seal that agreement.
Your former political boss, in some ways your mentor, the former president Álvaro Uribe, he says, and I'm using his words, that you have cozied up to terrorism. He says, Santos, it's not peace that is near, it is surrender to the FARC.
Well, who is giving up their arms? And who is keeping the arms? If you read what is being negotiated, what we are simply accepting is they can leave their arms, disarm, and continue their political struggle through legal means. And that's what a peace process is all about. And they are being subjected to transitional justice. So the most responsible will go through transitional justice in order to respect the rights of the victims, which is sort of the center of the solution of this conflict.
But in President Uribe's words, they are getting away with murder.
Well, if you analyze what President Uribe has been saying, you will come to the conclusion that he's being a bit emotional.
220,000 people died in this war. It lasted 50 years. People are emotional.
But that's exactly why we are trying to reach a peace agreement. So we don't have to have 220,000 more victims. A war is a factory of victims, and I want to stop that factory.
I just wonder on a personal level how you feel about the victims, those whose parents were perhaps murdered, those who saw their own children wiped out in massacres of villages. How do you explain to them that you believe it's important to give the FARC dignity?
The victims are my strongest allies. The source, the principal source of the support I have are the 7.5 million victims. I talk to them every single day, and talking to them is what gives me more energy to continue and persevere in the peace process.
The big question for Colombians is how this plays out early next year. You have said that you want a deal by the end of March 2016.
We have agreed with the FARC that by the 23rd of March we should sign the final agreement.
You've committed to what you call a plebiscite or a referendum where the final decision will be with the people of this nation.
Yes.
So when will that happen?
That will happen after we sign the final agreement. If we sign the final agreement between around March, let's say, then the plebiscite would be done a couple of months afterwards. We need to have time to explain to the people what the agreement is all about.
But
and the people can say, no, we don't like it, and then there's no deal.
What? Yes. After all of this,
yes,
the years of negotiation, you saying that this is vital for the future of your nation, you're telling me that if the public vote against it, you'll just walk away?
Yes, because that's what the commitment I made since the very beginning. The people,
with respect, Mr. President, you will have to resign at that point.
Well, I will be in serious difficulty, but I am absolutely convinced that the overwhelming majority of the Colombians will support me, will support this peace process.
You can take a funicular railway up the mountainside east of Bogota to the sanctuary of Monserrate. For Colombians, it's a place of pilgrimage. People here have lived with conflict all of their lives. Now they must decide whether they can trust the FARC to be partners, not enemies.
I have two positions. One, I feel that no, I need to give the opportunity to them because they are humans. They make mistakes in the past, and they have the reasons to commit all the crimes and things.
So on one level, you're prepared to forgive them.
Yeah.
But then, what's the second feeling?
Here, many people suffer terrible attacks, terrible things from these people, so they are not prepared to assume these people
They're
again.
not ready to forgive.
No, they are not. So
do you think Colombia will end up very divided? I mean, are there different opinions inside your own family?
Yeah, for example, mom and dad, they consider that they deserve another opportunity, but grandma and my teacher say no.
Santo, 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 santo es el Señor.
Colombia may be emerging from decades of darkness, but 50 years of war have left a legacy of pain and hate. There are wounds here that will take many years to heal.